Welcome back to another video, people, and today I've put together a list of photography documentaries that I've been watching for quite some time, whether it was in preparation for videos or on my free time, and I decided that they could be helpful to you or at least entertaining. You can learn a thing or two, maybe leave inspired. So links to the documentaries will be down below, as you can rent it or you can find them on YouTube or whatever, or you can buy them as well. And before we go, I want you to comment down below documentaries that you'd like to recommend me if you'd like to see more videos like this, and of course leave a like because it helps recommending the video. And now grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's go straight to another video. And so the first documentary on this list is McCullin, which is of course around the work of Don McCullin. And I watched this in preparation for my video about his work, so you can catch up with that video on the channel. And a disclaimer that I wanted to make is that if you're a sensitive viewer, if you're someone who's not familiar with McCullin's work, or if for some reason you find distressing images of extreme violence, then beware, because this documentary will have images like that, footage like that. So that's my disclaimer, but I really enjoyed this documentary. I felt that it was very complete because it chronicled Don's career and his work between different assignments, growing as a photographer and as a human being, to a point that after all the atrocities he witnessed, he finally found this peace. And this documentary is a must-watch whether you appreciate the work of McCullin or not, because it brings to the table notions of the role of the photographer in documenting, informing the public, the difficult discussion that is the one revolving around the ethics of photography, with people photographing disasters and in a way profiting from the tragedy of others. And it really puts on a scale almost the weight between the information, the need to document, against the weight of the suffering of the subject. And that to me was very interesting to think about. And of course, it also made me think of how the tides have turned in terms of how we portray, we as society, we the world, we the media we consume, has chosen to portray violence, has chosen to portray difficult subjects, taboo at some point as well. And so it's, I think, a very interesting documentary. It will give you a lot of food for thought. But now on to documentary number 2. And documentary number 2 is on the legendary work of photographer Julius Shulman, and he's known for his architecture photography, and I've done a video on him before. I've watched this documentary a long time ago, but I remember one of the reasons why I love this documentary was obviously because of Julius' personality, and if you've watched this documentary, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He has this very funny way, is funny disposition, is very light. He talks about things in a very light manner. He's very funny, charismatic. And he pairs this with an incredible knowledge and insight on photography, which I think is it's a plus. And I really, really enjoyed this documentary. So much so that I think you should watch this regardless of you being an architectural or urban photographer or not. Because Shulman discusses things like light and perspective, which are so important in photography in general. This documentary also made me want to explore more of his work, and if you want to catch up with that video, it's on the channel. But I remember whenever I talked about Shulman's work, I talked about the planning, staging, and degree of premeditation that surrounds his work, and what we can learn from that. This documentary is also great at illustrating the architectural movement within mid-century America, as well as how Julius Shulman became a photographer in this setting, going through also some of the most important stages of his career, and how he really contributed to bring design and architecture to a more broader audience. And if you're interested in photography, history, and Julius Shulman with a bit of humor, this is a documentary for you. And this is a documentary that runs for about an hour. I've actually watched it quite recently in preparation for my video as well. But I wanted to bring this documentary into here because I feel like not only chronicles the work of Gruyaert, which I think is an amazing photographer. I think his street work is really, really good. You can learn so much from him. And I feel like listening to his insight into, shaping the world around you, understanding what you see, understanding color, seeing in color is really, really important. And amongst other things, of course, but I feel like it gives an insight to his photography that otherwise would be very hard to get from different videos made on him, including my video, and different videos or different sources of, information that you might have. And to me, since I'm a big enthusiast of Gruyaert's work, it was interesting to hear his perspectives on photography, and especially how traveling and getting in contact with other cultures and philosophies played a great role in his career. And since I love traveling, this documentary brings to light the importance of putting ourselves in different settings and practice the idea of versatility as photographers, which is something I talked about in my recent video, Learning to See with a Camera, the idea of seeking discomfort and how that can contribute to our growth as photographers. And honestly, it's very inspiring to watch someone like Gruyaert that comes from what he calls a small circle to discover the world, and also his takes being an European on how he perceived America and discussing his book East-West. Anyways, this documentary feels like a masterclass where he talks about different elements of the composition as well, organizing the frame and whatnot. So links obviously will be down below, but now let's move on to the next documentary, which is surprisingly on Saul Leiter. This documentary was to me a kind of like a puzzle. I do see the value in it. I am a big enthusiast of Saul Leiter's photography. You guys know I've done videos on him. However, I am honest. I'm always honest here on the channel, and I'm going to be transparent with my opinion. I think if you love Saul Leiter's work or you're familiar with his work, you should watch this documentary because it will give you an interesting glimpse of who he was, his personality, and due to the intimacy of this documentary, which is pretty much filmed in Saul's apartment or following him in the rare times he goes outside and interacts with his neighbors, you have this feeling that he's talking directly to you. And I really appreciate this documentary. However, I hope I'm not hurting anyone's feelings here by saying that for my personal taste, the storytelling of the documentary was pretty weak. I felt there was so much that could have been done. There was a lot of context that could have been given, especially to fully understand the scope of his work, instead of having Saul Leiter sometimes also saying on different occasions that he didn't understand why the filmmaker was even doing the documentary. And quite honestly, I just felt that it lacked substance, really. I feel like for the amazing opportunity that would have been talking with Saul Leiter, especially on his photography not being seen before and being kind of like discovered much, much later, and talking about his color photographs and, you know, talking about just how he sees the world would have been so important. I felt like it lacked substance on that level. And the documentary is entirely filmed, you know, just in a very intimate perspective. And I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot more that could have been done, in my personal opinion. And I think like if you're someone who's not familiar with Saul Leiter's work, you just won't really, I think you'll need a lot of context. And, you know, yeah, that's what I have to say. Also, I didn't like the music. I felt it was too dramatic for Saul's bubbly personality. He actually was, you know, very funny. He was very bantery. He laughed quite a lot of times, you know, just in his house. And he was really nice to see. He came across very genuine. And so I felt that he was kind of misplaced. And I know that this is kind of like a small thing, but I think it goes a long way to pair image and sound. Anyways, I still think, regardless of this is my personal opinion and I'm being transparent, I still think you should watch this documentary, especially because if you're a fan of Saul Leiter's work, if you're an enthusiast, whatever it is, it's always good to listen to the artist or the source of, you know, that, you know, piece of artwork that you see, that you love so much. Talk about it and gain a different perspective. And I think he definitely has a lot to teach us. So yeah, I'll leave it up to you. But for now, let's move on to the 5th documentary of today's video. You know when they say you leave the best for last? Well, that's what I've done here today. This has been, I think, my favorite documentary photography that I've seen in the last, say, months. I think is one of my favorites today. And to no detriment to the other documentaries, I feel like I really, really learned from them. I feel like this documentary is very important because it captures the magnitude, the personality, the work, the context, and of course, the struggles of an artist. And in this case, of a photographer who we know and is very dear to us here on the channel, Garry Winogrand. I think the more I watch and the more I get to read about Garry Winogrand, he becomes more and more one of my favorite photographers. And I really like his photography. And I feel like, of course, this documentary has a lot of photos that I hadn't seen before. And one of the things that I have to say, though, one thing you want when you're finishing a YouTube video about photography or a documentary, whatever piece on photography, even if it is a written piece, you want to finish with that inspiration feeling that you want to grab your camera and go out and shoot. And that's exactly what I did when I finished this documentary. And this film, I believe, was put together by PBS for their series American Masters, and this was all in 2018, but I also believe that this documentary was later released theatrically in 2019, and it chronicles the different ballads of Winogrand's career, from the early days in New York to traveling across the country and ultimately moving to Los Angeles and his later work. There's different people that come in and out and give a really good insight into why his photography is so important in the American cultural and art scene. But at the same time, this is a very human documentary that has his ex-wife and friends that knew him personally, and they chronicle the struggles he faced as a divorced dad, as a struggling artist, and his declining health. And it really paints a complete picture to me, and that's why this was perhaps my favorite documentary, because I left it wanting to see more of Winogrand, wanting to get his books, to learn more with him, and ultimately, and more importantly, I finished it and I went out photographing. And this has been all for today, so I want to thank you for watching and supporting the channel. Links will be down below to the documentaries once more. Links are down below to my work. If you want to support the channel, you can grab a print from the print shop. New collection is on. And of course, you can subscribe now to the members. You get access to, content, exclusive content, and of course to other perks. But information to that is down below. And yeah, thanks so much for everything. I appreciate all your support. I'll see you here on the channel very, very soon. And stay safe, keep shooting, creating, whatever you're doing. And I'm out. Peace.